Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? The room was loud with voices, maps rustling, commanders leaning over glowing screens, their words sharp, clipped, deliberate. Plans were laid down like weapons, targets, routes, timelines. Each officer carried the weight of experience in their voice, gravelly, confident, heavy with the kind of certainty that came from years in the field. And yet she sat there, silent, almost invisible. Her name tag caught the light, thin black letters over muted fabric. To some, just a name. To her, it was everything her family had carried, the one thread tying her back to the life she left behind. But in this room, among men with scarred hands and voices that carried authority, it was just another name. She could feel it in the way their eyes slid past her, like she was too young, too small, too untested to belong at that table. 23, that was her age. Too young, they whispered, too quiet. She didn't argue. She had learned long ago silence was stronger than words. Words could be doubted, mocked, ignored. Silence forced people to watch what you did. But there was something she hadn't told them, not yet. Her hands rested on the table, fingers curled slightly, the faintest tremor hidden beneath her skin. Not fear exactly, though fear was there, waiting. It was something deeper. A tension she carried since the day she signed the papers, since the day she walked away from the warm kitchen where her mother's voice once called her name. She still remembered her mother's hands, flour-dusted, roughened by years of work, pressing bread dough with the same patience she once pressed her daughter's shoulders. "Strength doesn't always need to shout," she used to say. "Sometimes it waits, sometimes it holds." That memory sat inside her chest, now like a steady ember. The commander's voice cut through. "We need a forward observer, high ground, no margin for error." She raised her eyes. That was her job. No one looked at her. Not yet. Their glances flicked across the table, settling on others, waiting for a volunteer. No one spoke. Because they all knew the cost. Forward observer wasn't glory. It wasn't medals. It was isolation, exposure, risk. It meant being alone, holding your breath while the rest of the unit relied on you without seeing your face. She leaned forward just slightly, and her chair creaked. That sound was enough. Eyes finally fell on her, some doubtful, some indifferent, a few curious. She didn't make a speech, didn't puff her chest, didn't explain her qualifications. Just 3 words, quiet, even, certain. "I'll take it." The room stilled for a moment. Then almost immediately, voices picked back up, rolling over her like water over stone. Assignments shifted, plans adjusted. But one of the older men, grizzled, eyes lined from years under sun and smoke, studied her longer than the rest. He said nothing, just a look that lingered as if he knew something the others did not. She kept her eyes on the map. Hours later, when the briefing broke, she lingered in the empty room. The map still glowed faintly, screens humming in the low light. She traced the route with her fingertip, valleys, ridgelines, rivers that shimmered like veins. Every mark on the paper meant ground she would soon feel under her boots. Her chest tightened. She imagined the silence of that ridge, the sharp cold of night air, the endless wait with only her breath to keep her company. She closed her eyes. And there he was again, her brother. Not in uniform, not in medals. Just a boy, barefoot in the backyard, chasing a worn-out soccer ball until his laughter filled the dusk. She hadn't seen him in 5 years. Not since the day he left, promising letters, promising he'd come back. He never did. They gave her a folded flag instead. That was why she was here. Not for medals, not for approval, not even for the weight of silence she carried in her chest. She was here because someone had to continue the promise he couldn't keep. And if they doubted her, let them. The convoy left before dawn. Engines rumbling low, wheels grinding over gravel, each soldier lost in private thoughts. She sat in the back, helmet tilted low, rifle across her lap. No one spoke to her. That was fine. Words weren't needed now. The world outside was painted in gray-blue as dawn reached its pale fingers over the mountains. Dust rose behind the vehicles like ghosts. She listened to the hum of machinery, to the steady rhythm of her own heart. A younger soldier across from her fidgeted with his gloves. He caught her eye, forced a small grin. First time. She shook her head. He chuckled softly. Could have fooled me, you're calm. She didn't answer. But inside her stomach twisted. Calm wasn't the word. Focus, maybe. Focus so sharp it cut through every other noise. When the convoy stopped, she stepped out, boots crunching against gravel. The wind hit her face, cold, clean, almost too pure for what this land had seen. She looked up. The ridge towered above, jagged against the morning sky, her path. One of the sergeants gave her a nod. Not quite approval, not quite doubt, just acknowledgement. "You know what's waiting up there?" he asked. She adjusted the strap on her pack. Silence. He gave a short, rough laugh. "You'll fit right in." The climb was slow, deliberate, each step measured. The pack dug into her shoulders, rifle weight steady across her back. The higher she went, the thinner the air grew until every breath felt earned. Halfway up she stopped, crouching low as the wind shifted. The world spread below her, convoy now distant specks, soldiers moving like ants. She was apart from them now, alone. Her throat tightened, and she let herself think just for a moment of what her mother would say if she could see her now. Would she be proud or afraid? A sudden crack split the air. Not thunder, not wind, a shot, distant, sharp, echoing through the valley. Her breath caught. She pressed low against the rock, eyes scanning. Another shot, closer. The convoy below scattered into movement, soldiers diving for cover. Her chest pounded. This was it, the reason she was here. She crawled higher, keeping low, every muscle tense, breath shallow. The ridge was close now. One more push. Her hands scraped raw against stone. Boots slipped once, twice. She bit back the curse, forcing herself steady. At the top, she flattened herself against the ground, peering through her scope. The valley stretched wide below, smoke rising, shouts carried thin by the wind. And there movement, shadows shifting where no shadows should. She whispered the coordinates, voice steady despite the hammer of her heart. Her radio crackled with response, the commander's voice, relief in his tone. "Good eyes." But she said nothing. She just kept watching, because she knew this was only the beginning. And the silence she carried was not done speaking. She kept her eye pressed to the scope, unmoving, as if the glass itself had fused to her skin. The valley below was chaos now. Dust clouds kicked up by running feet, soldiers scattering, radios crackling with frantic updates. Gunfire snapped like brittle wood in the cold air, sharp, irregular, echoes bouncing off stone. But she wasn't watching the noise. She was watching the stillness. Movement can lie, stillness cannot. And there, just past the line of boulders, was stillness, too still. A shadow crouched where no shadow belonged. She exhaled slowly, squeezed her mic, and whispered coordinates. Calm, flat, no emotion. The artillery answer came seconds later, precise, bone-shaking. A plume of dust, then silence. Her silence. The men below never saw her. They never needed to. But still the doubt lingered, floating like smoke. Would they credit her? Or would her part in this be erased, buried under louder voices, deeper ranks? She pushed the thought aside. It didn't matter. Recognition was never the point. Her radio hissed alive again. "Stay sharp. We'll move in 15. Keep eyes open." She clicked once in reply. No words. Her lips were dry. She touched the canteen at her side but didn't drink. Not yet. Thirst was bearable. The mission came first, always first. Still, beneath the discipline, her chest ached. A small, sharp reminder that she wasn't made of stone, no matter how hard she tried. She let herself think of home for only a breath. The kitchen again, her mother's humming, the scrape of chair legs against tile. Ordinary sounds, safe sounds, the kind of silence that was filled with life, not death. And then, a glint. Her eyes snapped back to the scope. Sunlight caught on metal half a kilometer west, the faint arc of a rifle barrel, a sniper, waiting, watching. For them, for her. Her pulse quickened. She inhaled through her nose, slow, steady, letting the world narrow, wind speed, distance, the angle of light, the rhythm of her heartbeat. For a moment she wasn't on the ridge. She was 13 again, her brother beside her, both lying in the dry grass outside their old house. He'd handed her his battered pellet rifle, teaching her how to line up the sights, how to squeeze, not jerk. He had laughed when she missed the first time, then patted her shoulder. Patience. Breathe. Don't force it. She blinked. The memory faded, replaced by the present. The target was still there, still waiting. She shifted her cheek against the stock, exhaled, and pulled the trigger. The rifle kicked against her shoulder. The echo rolled through the valley like a storm breaking. Through the scope she saw the figure slump. Metal clattered against rock, then stillness again, true stillness this time. Her hands trembled, just slightly. She pressed them harder against the ground to hide it, even from herself. Her radio hissed once more. Confirmed, good shot. No praise, no ceremony, just confirmation. She preferred it that way. Minutes stretched into an hour. The firefight below subsided, replaced by movement, orders, regrouping. From her vantage, she tracked every shadow, every flicker of danger. Each time her voice cut through static, it carried calm, unshaken. But inside, the doubt never stopped whispering. She remembered their looks at the briefing, the way their eyes had slid past her, as if her presence at the table was an accident. She wondered if they still thought that now. She didn't know, she didn't ask. Because something heavier pressed on her chest, something she hadn't told them. Not yet. Night fell slowly, the valley swallowing the last light. The air thinned, sharpened, biting at her exposed skin. She pulled her hood tighter, breath clouding faintly in front of her. The ridge turned quiet, too quiet. Her ears strained. Every rustle of wind across stone, every distant snap of rock became a question. Was it nothing? Or was it someone moving in the dark? She adjusted her rifle, shifting to another angle. Her stomach cramped with hunger, but she ignored it. Hunger was nothing compared to the silence pressing in from all sides. It was in that silence she thought of him again, her brother. Not the boy with the soccer ball, but the man in uniform, standing in the doorway the last time she saw him. He had hugged her so tightly she thought her ribs would crack. His voice low, steady, but his eyes gave him away. Fear, not of the mission, not of dying, but of leaving her behind. She had promised him she'd be strong, that she'd keep their mother safe. But she had broken that promise. He had gone, and she had followed. Her throat burned. She swallowed hard, forcing the memory down. Now was not the time. Then footsteps. Soft, careful, too careful. She froze, pressing against the earth, ears straining. The sound grew clearer, boots against gravel, slow, deliberate. Her rifle shifted, breath shallow. A silhouette appeared just below the ridge, barely a darker shadow against night. Not one of hers. Enemy. Her chest tightened. The distance was short, too short for mistakes. She aimed, finger brushing the trigger. And then another sound. A voice, low, rough, speaking a language she only half understood. Another figure joined the first, then another. 3. Her jaw clenched. She could take one, maybe two if her aim held, but 3. Her finger tightened anyway. And then she stopped. Because in that split second she saw something. The way one of them bent, pulled a flask from his pack, drank deep. The way another rubbed his knee as if it ached, muttering under his breath. They weren't shadows, they were men, tired, cold, hungry. Her breath hitched. For just a heartbeat, she saw her brother's face in theirs. She shut her eyes. When she opened them again, her finger steadied. The rifle cracked, one dropped. The others shouted, scrambling, firing blindly into the ridge. Bullets ricocheted off stone, sparks lighting the dark. Her pulse thundered, but she didn't move. Another shot, another body fell. The last one fled into the night, footsteps pounding down the slope until they faded into silence. Her hands trembled harder now. She pressed her forehead against the cool metal of her rifle, chest rising and falling in shallow bursts. And in that fragile silence, guilt whispered, because she had looked into their humanity and pulled the trigger anyway. The radio crackled, contact. She swallowed, forcing her voice steady, neutralized. Copy. No questions, no comfort. Just another confirmation. She lay back against the stone, staring up at the sky. Stars pricked the black, sharp and endless. Her body ached, her stomach burned, her throat was dry as dust. And yet she stayed. Because her silent duty demanded it. Because if she faltered now, more would die. She closed her eyes and whispered, so faintly the wind almost carried it away. Forgive me. Why did the silence feel heavier at night? It pressed down on her chest like a weight, thick and unmoving, wrapping around her until she almost forgot what her own voice sounded like. The ridge was black now, darker than the valley below. The moon had dipped behind jagged clouds, leaving only fragments of pale light that caught the stone edges like broken glass. Her eyes burned from staring through the scope too long. Hours had passed. She didn't know how many. Time bent strangely when you were alone, minutes dragging like hours, then vanishing before you realized they had gone. She shifted her position, joints stiff, every movement deliberate to keep the sound from carrying. The cold had crept in through her gloves, numbing her fingers until the metal of the rifle felt fused to her skin. Her body begged for sleep. Every blink lingered too long. Every breath carried the risk of slipping into darkness. But she couldn't sleep. Not here, not now. Because if she closed her eyes, someone else might never open theirs again. Her radio stayed quiet. No orders, no chatter, only static, faint and constant like the heartbeat of the machine. She thought of her mother again, not in the kitchen this time, but on the porch late at night, the light above the door casting a weak glow over her face. Her mother had stood there so many times, waiting for her brother to come home, waiting long after the world had given up. She wondered, was she standing there now, waiting for her daughter instead? The thought hurt more than the cold. She pressed her face back to the scope, forced herself to focus. The valley was still, too still. She swept her sights left, then right. Shadows stretched long across the ground. Nothing moved. Her mind whispered doubts. Did I miss something? Did I make a mistake? She shook her head slightly, as if she could scatter the thoughts like dust. And then, a flicker. Low, subtle, but real. Far off at the tree line, a faint light, a cigarette. Her stomach tightened. She whispered into the mic, voice a thread. Contact, grid 57, single light. A pause, then, copy, hold eyes. She held her breath, watching. The ember glowed, faded, glowed again. A pattern, not random, a signal. Her pulse quickened. She tracked it, waiting, and then the figures emerged. One, then two, then more, moving through the dark with precision. Quiet, trained. Not farmers, not wanderers, soldiers. She counted 7, maybe more behind. Her throat tightened. 7 men, maybe 10, and only her to see them. Her orders were clear. Observe, report, call it in. But her finger twitched against the trigger anyway. The old voice of doubt whispered louder. Do they still believe you can handle this? Do you believe it yourself? She exhaled, whispered coordinates. The valley below stirred in answer. A squad moving, positioning, silent as shadows themselves. She stayed low, eyes fixed through the scope, the night breathing against her cheek. Gunfire cracked minutes later, short, sharp, controlled. The squad below engaged, ambushing the figures before they reached the convoy. Her chest tightened as she watched. She could see the chaos in the distance, muzzles flashing, shapes falling, the kind of violence that ended lives without ceremony. Her stomach twisted. And then she saw him. Not her brother. Not really. Just a soldier below, ducking low, moving fast, his silhouette catching the moonlight in a way that brought the memory back like a knife. She blinked hard, but the image clung. For a heartbeat, the mission dissolved. She wasn't on the ridge anymore. She was back home, the porch light glowing, her brother's laugh echoing faintly in her ears. She dug her nails into the dirt, grounding herself. Focus. When the shooting stopped, silence swept in again, heavier this time, as if the valley itself was holding its breath. Her radio crackled, clear, good call. She didn't answer, just clicked once. Her hands were trembling again, not from the cold this time, from something deeper. Because every shadow she watched die seemed to drag a piece of her with it. The hours crawled. The sky lightened, faint streaks of gray seeping into black. Dawn was coming. Her body screamed for rest. Her eyelids sagged, her limbs heavy. She let herself close her eyes for just a second, just one. And the memory came. Her brother sitting at the edge of his bed, lacing his boots. The morning he left. He had looked at her then, his face pale in the early light. He had smiled, but it hadn't reached his eyes. "You don't have to be like me," he had said quietly. "Promise me that." But she had never promised. The radio snapped her awake, a voice urgent. "We've got movement west, need confirmation." Her eyes flew open. She pressed to the scope. The ridge swam in front of her for a moment, blurred by fatigue. She blinked until it cleared. And there shadows again, fast this time, purposeful more than before. She whispered the coordinates, forced her voice steady. The squad moved again. Gunfire split the morning air. This time it lasted longer, louder. She pressed her face harder to the scope, tracking, watching, feeding details through the mic. Her voice was calm, cold, almost detached. But inside she was breaking. Because with every shot, every scream that carried through the valley, she felt the weight of her silence growing heavier. This was her duty, to see, to speak, to remain unseen. But no one had told her what silence would cost. When the last echo faded, she lay back against the stone, staring up at the pale light of morning. Her body ached. Her eyes stung. Her throat was raw from whispering into the mic. And in that stillness, she finally let herself ask the question she had buried since the beginning. How many more? Her chest tightened. She closed her eyes, breathing shallow. She could still feel the trigger against her finger, still see the men who had fallen, still hear the voice of her brother in her head. The silence had spoken louder than guns. But it was breaking her. And dawn was only the beginning of another day. Why did the sun feel like an enemy? The ridge had transformed under its light. Shadows that once hid her now lay bare against the pale morning. Every ridge line, every jagged rock, every loose stone was suddenly visible, unforgiving. Exposure, vulnerability. Her eyes adjusted, scanning. The valley below was quieter now, the chaos of last night replaced by an uneasy calm. Smoke drifted lazily from scattered fires, curling into the soft sunlight like thin ghosts. She had been awake almost 24 hours. Her muscles screamed. Her joints felt like iron chains, and yet she could not move, not yet. Because there was something she hadn't told them. Something she had buried beneath orders, beneath training, beneath survival itself. Her brother's memory sat in her chest like a stone. She remembered his laugh, his stubborn pride, the way he had always pushed her to run faster, aim truer. And now the weight of him, of his absence, pressed against her heart with every breath. Her hand brushed her rifle. The metal was cold, unforgiving. She had killed before, yes, but never like this. Alone, silent, watching, choosing. A crackle from the radio broke her reverie. Eyes on movement, need status. She pressed the mic, voice calm, flat, clear, no hostiles visible, ridge secured. Silence, then a low, cautious acknowledgement. Her eyes stayed forward. The valley seemed to hold its breath. And in that silence she noticed movement, not soldiers, not enemy, but a lone figure. A civilian. The first she had seen since she arrived. A boy, no older than 12, emerging from the smoke, clutching a small bundle. He froze when he saw the ridge, her ridge. For a heartbeat she froze as well. Orders flashed in her mind. Rules, protocol, threat assessment. The child could be a distraction, a trap. Enemy sympathizers sometimes used children to shield themselves. Her pulse thundered. Her finger itched against the trigger. And yet he was just a boy, hair matted, clothes torn, eyes wide, afraid. She swallowed hard, forcing herself calm. The rifle remained steady. She had seen death. She had delivered it. But she had never seen innocence so close. Not like this. Her mind raced. Call it in, evacuate him, ignore. Ignoring was easier, but it would haunt her, she knew it. She let herself lower the rifle fractionally, just enough to show she wasn't a threat. The boy took a small, trembling step forward. And then froze. She whispered almost to herself, "It's okay, I won't hurt you." The words felt strange in the open air, almost human, almost wrong in this place of violence. He didn't move, didn't respond, just stared. Her thoughts flickered to her mother again. How she had taught her to see the person before the uniform, the life before the orders. She took another slow breath, a decision. "Come here," she said, softer this time, more coaxing than commanding. The boy hesitated, then ran the final few feet, collapsing near her knees. He gasped, coughing smoke and dust, eyes wide. She knelt, keeping her distance, scanning the valley with the corner of her vision, always alert, always aware, always silent. "What's your name?" she asked, voice gentle, calm. He blinked, shook his head. "Doesn't matter," she said, "not right now." She pulled her canteen from her pack, tipping it slightly so he could drink. His hands shook. He didn't look away. She didn't move too fast, never moved too fast. The wind shifted. The sun climbed higher. She could feel it burning against her back, revealing her, but the boy's presence anchored her. Something human, something real. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time was strange on the ridge. Finally he spoke. They took my sister." Her chest tightened. Her hands ached to move, to do something, to save. But the mission still demanded everything. Observation, reporting, survival. She couldn't abandon her post, not for anyone. And yet, the ache in her chest would not be ignored. She adjusted her pack, pulling her radio close. "Command," she whispered, voice low. "I have a civilian, possible intel, requesting guidance." Static, then a voice. "Remain in position. Do not engage directly. Evacuation teams are en route." She exhaled. Relief mingled with frustration. Control was slipping, but she could manage. She always did. The boy shivered and she draped her jacket over him. It was thin, and her armor offered no warmth for him, only protection. But it was something. Her own hunger, fatigue, and the lingering ache of last night pressed against her, whispering that she was human, and human meant weakness. But she ignored it. For now. Hours passed. Observation continued. Her eyes were sharp, her movements minimal, each action deliberate, almost invisible. Her scope caught every shadow, every glint of metal, every subtle movement. And then she noticed them, reinforcements, not the enemy, not yet. Friendly units, crawling up the ridge, careful, deliberate. Her stomach twisted, relief, fear, pride, exhaustion. The boy saw them too. Relief softened his face, and for a moment the weight on her chest lifted. She remained still, watching, silent, unseen. Because her strength wasn't in making herself known. It was in staying hidden until her duty was done. She remembered her brother again. If he had been here, he would have laughed at the boy, teased her for caring too much. But she didn't need his laughter now. She had her own code. The reinforcements reached the top of the ridge. They glanced at her, surprised to see the civilian with her. She nodded slightly. No words. A young lieutenant approached, face pale, voice tight. "You saved him," she said, not accusing, not praising, just stating fact. She shrugged. He needed someone to see him. The lieutenant studied her, clearly conflicted. That was brave, risky. Her lips pressed thin. Duty isn't always brave. Sometimes it's just necessary. The boy clung to her jacket as they led him away. She stayed behind, alone again. The ridge stretched before her, sun climbing higher, revealing every crevice, every shadow, every risk. And she stayed. Because that was what she had come here to do. Because silence sometimes spoke louder than guns. Because her promise, buried deep, demanded it. She exhaled, letting herself feel the ache in her chest. Not shame, not pride, just reality, human reality. And she whispered again, barely audible, "Sometimes all you can do is hold on." The morning wore on. The valley settled into uneasy calm. Orders came in waves. Movements, checks, communications. She reported, observed, stayed silent. And through it all, she carried the boy's face in her mind. A reminder that strength was not in absence of compassion, but in the quiet balance of duty and heart. By noon, she allowed herself a small moment. Head against rock, eyes closing for a fraction of a second. Breathing, alive. The world was vast, violent, cold, but she remained unwavering. Because she had chosen her path. And no one, not the doubters, not the enemy, not fate itself, could take that from her. Why did the wind feel like it was carrying secrets? The ridge hummed faintly in the midday heat. Stones radiated warmth, and dust clung to the back of her neck. Her muscles ached as if every step she'd taken in the last 24 hours had left a permanent mark. Her eyes scanned the valley again, fingers brushing the rifle stock with habitual care. She had learned to move in shadows, to become a whisper on the wind, to let the world pass by while she observed. But the human element, that could never be contained. The boy from earlier still lingered in her mind. She could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he clutched memories that weren't safe to keep. She had handed him over, but her heart hadn't let go, not completely. She exhaled through her nose, letting the dust of the ridge fill her lungs briefly. Awareness never faltered, not even for a second. And then a sound. Soft, almost imperceptible, a shift of movement behind the stones. She froze, every muscle coiled, every sense alert. Her pulse thundered, not fear exactly, anticipation, knowing that the enemy could be anywhere, that every shadow was a possibility. The scope swept the ridge behind her. Nothing. She swallowed, steadying her voice. "Status check." The radio hissed with static, then crackled. "All clear, keep your eyes forward." She nodded, though no one could see her. Her own reassurance had to be enough. She shifted again, crawling to a slightly higher vantage point. The sun burned bright now, exposing everything. Her silhouette was a stark line against the ridge, vulnerable. And that vulnerability drew attention. A sudden series of snaps echoed from the far side of the valley. Faint, deliberate, someone moving carefully, too carefully. Her eyes locked on the movement. Her breath caught. 3 figures crouched low, crossing what should have been empty terrain. Enemy, no doubt now. Her finger hovered on the trigger, heart steady, mind alert, training kicking in, overriding the ache in her body. But then something familiar. The first figure carried a bundle, not weapons, not ammunition. Another civilian, a girl, her age maybe 15. Eyes wide, fear written across every line of her small face. Her chest tightened. The world narrowed, duty versus compassion, observation versus action. Orders were simple. She was to report, to remain unseen, to survive. And yet she couldn't ignore them. She whispered coordinates into the radio. Movement, civilian sighted, 5 o'clock from my position, advancing toward the convoy. Static, then the voice. Do not engage, wait for support, observation only. Her stomach twisted. Orders made sense on paper. Morality made sense in stories. Reality was something else entirely. The figures moved closer. The girl stumbled. One of the enemy's darker silhouettes against the sun yelled, grabbing her arm, pulling her down. The girl screamed softly. She pressed herself against the ridge, heart pounding. Her eyes locked on the girl, then on the enemy, then back on the radio. Support was far, too far. She would not arrive in time if she waited. Her jaw clenched, fingers trembling, not from fatigue but from the weight of decision. She took a breath, 1, 2. Then she acted. Shots rang out, echoing down the valley. The enemy fell, first one, then two. Chaos erupted as the remaining figures scrambled for cover. She stayed low, moving only when necessary, every shot precise. The girl dove behind a boulder, crying softly. The wind carried the sound to her ears like a cruel reminder. Her chest heaved. She swallowed against the lump in her throat. When the smoke and dust settled, the girl was safe, not unscathed but alive. She exhaled slowly, letting the adrenaline ebb. Relief mingled with exhaustion, pride with guilt. Because even as she had acted to save a life, she knew that somewhere else, someone else had fallen because of her choice. Her radio crackled, confirmed civilian safe. Yes, she whispered, voice quiet, trembling just slightly. Safe. She watched as support arrived, soldiers moving to secure the valley, taking the girl into protective custody. Relief painted their faces. She allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible nod. Alone again, she felt the ridge press against her like a weight. The sun high above burned her back, revealing every scar, every mark of fatigue. She pressed her cheek against the stone, eyes closed. Thoughts of her brother came unbidden. How he had always joked that she was too serious, too quiet, too young to understand the world. She understood it now, more than she had ever wanted to. A distant voice called her name, not through the radio, a human voice. She opened her eyes. One of the soldiers who had arrived approached cautiously, recognition in his gaze, respect finally, not loud, not spoken, but there. You held this ridge, he said softly, all night alone. She shrugged. Words felt unnecessary. The ridge spoke for her. Her silence had carried weight. Her actions had spoken louder than any voice ever could. And yet inside she felt frayed, tired, hollowed by the constant tension of life and death. Night was approaching again. She would not rest, not fully, not yet. The mission demanded vigilance, observation, survival. Her mind flickered to the civilians she had saved. The boy, the girl, faces that would haunt her, faces she couldn't forget. The ridge was quiet now, only wind, only her breath. And the distant echo of orders, distant as the sun on the horizon. She pressed her forehead to the stone, her eyes closed, and whispered, barely audible, sometimes strength is just surviving the moment. Because tomorrow would come, the enemy would move again, orders would demand more, and the ridge would wait for her, silent, expectant. She exhaled slowly, letting the weight of the day settle, letting herself feel the fatigue she had denied. Her hands rested on the rifle, fingers brushing the metal, cold, heavy, necessary. The sun dipped lower, painting the valley in blood-red light. Shadows stretched long. Threats could hide anywhere. She opened her eyes. And she stayed. Because her duty, silent, unacknowledged, uncelebrated, was not over. And because sometimes the world demanded a quiet courage that no one would ever notice, except those who lived to see another day. Why did the ridge feel alive? The wind had shifted again, carrying with it the scent of dust, smoke, and something metallic she couldn't place. Her muscles screamed from the long hours of vigilance, but she stayed low, eyes scanning every shadow, every movement. The valley below had settled into a fragile calm, but she knew better. Calm was a mask, a pause before the storm, and storms always came. Her rifle rested against her shoulder, fingers twitching slightly against the trigger. Not fatigue, not fear, anticipation, every nerve taut, every sense stretched. Her mind flicked back to the civilians she had saved, the boy, the girl. Faces that lingered in her thoughts, reminders that her duty wasn't just to orders but to humanity. And yet, humanity carried consequences. She had seen the cost. A snap behind her. Her breath caught. She twisted slightly, bringing her scope to bear, scanning the ridge behind her. Nothing. Then another snap, and another, closer this time. Her pulse thundered. Not fear exactly. Awareness. Survival instinct sharpened by exhaustion and the quiet weight of responsibility. She pressed herself flat against the stone, eyes sweeping the terrain. The sun had dipped lower, shadows lengthening, turning every contour into a potential threat. She counted 3. 3 enemy combatants moving with deliberate caution, flanking her position from a ridge below. She estimated their distance, calculated angles, predicted movement. She could take 1, maybe 2, but 3 together risked everything. Her thoughts raced, rules of engagement, duty, mission priorities, and then the girl, the boy, both alive because of her choices, lives she couldn't sacrifice. Her finger brushed the trigger. The first shot rang out, sharp, echoing across the valley. The enemy froze, confusion written in their movements. Second shot, controlled, precise. The third, however, moved faster than she anticipated. Her aim shifted instinctively, heart hammering. The sound of bullets ricocheting off stone filled the air. Sparks flared. Dust rose like smoke from a small fire. Her chest tightened, every breath a conscious effort, every muscle coiled ready. The enemy scrambled, 2 down, 1 still moving, faster, smarter, closer to her ridge. She exhaled slowly, focusing. Every second mattered. 1 misstep could cost her life and the mission. And then a sound she didn't expect, a whisper, human not enemy, behind her. She spun, rifle raised, eyes scanning. Nothing. A shift in the wind carried faint words, not her language, yet urgent, a call. She froze, conflicted, focused, alert. The enemy below was now retreating. Strategic withdrawal. She pressed the mic. Enemy moving west, 2 down, 1 retreating, ridge secure. Static, then acknowledgement. Copy, hold position. Her shoulder ached, her back burned, fatigue clawed at her mind, yet she remained, eyes fixed, every sense alert. The boy and girl she had saved earlier were gone, evacuated by support units. She had watched them leave, feeling both relief and an emptiness she couldn't name. Human connection was dangerous here. Emotional attachments, a liability. She pressed her forehead to the stone, closed her eyes for a fraction of a second, just enough to feel the ache of exhaustion, just enough to remind herself she was human. The ridge was quiet now, too quiet. And then movement, quick, subtle, not enemy-friendly, maybe, or a trap. Her instincts screamed. Every shadow, every rustle, every whisper of wind was a potential threat. She raised the rifle, tracking. A figure emerged, not in uniform, not armed. A local fleeing the valley, hands raised in surrender. Her chest tight, her finger twitched, rules of engagement, orders, mission. She held her fire. Because sometimes strength was restraint. Sometimes courage was measured in moments of inaction. The figure froze, recognized her. Maybe, or maybe just afraid, fear was universal. Her voice, quiet, controlled, carried across the stone. Stay low, move slowly. He obeyed carefully, step by step, inch by inch. And then another sound, from below. A sudden flurry of gunfire, enemy, or miscommunication. The valley erupted. Her pulse spiked, adrenaline surged. She ducked, pressed to the ridge. Bullets kicked up dust around her boots. Her mind raced, Calculations, angles, probabilities, human lives, orders, duty. The enemy had regrouped, advanced faster than expected. They were coordinated now, moving with intent, precision. Her finger squeezed the trigger. 1, 2, 3 shots, controlled, calculated, efficient. The reinforcements below moved in response. Support units engaged. The valley became a controlled chaos of flashes, shouts, and gunfire. Her chest ached, her back burned, fatigue pressed against every nerve, and yet she remained. Focused, silent, invisible. Because this was her strength. Not loud, not boastful, not celebrated, silent, resilient, steady. Hours passed, the enemy withdrew, the valley quieted, support units secured positions, orders flowed in, confirming the ridge as cleared. She remained alone, watching, waiting. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the world in crimson. Shadows stretched long, merging with darkness. Her thoughts drifted briefly to her brother. How he had laughed, how he had challenged her, how he had trusted her. She exhaled slowly, whispered barely audible, "This is for you." The night settled in fully. Stars pricked the black above. Wind carried the scent of smoke, earth, and iron. She pressed her cheek against the stone. Her hands rested on the rifle, fingers brushing the metal, cold, heavy, necessary. The ridge was quiet, yet alive, waiting, expecting. And she remained. Because silent duty was her voice, resilience her shield, humanity her hidden weapon. Because in a world of noise and chaos, she had learned to let action speak where words failed. And she whispered again, as the wind carried it away, "Sometimes courage is just staying when everything inside you says run." Why did the horizon seem to hold its breath? She had been on the ridge for nearly 2 days now. Hours blurred together, moments of sharp awareness, long stretches of agonizing stillness, and the crushing weight of fatigue pressing against every joint. Her muscles screamed with every movement, yet she stayed low, eyes scanning the valley, mind a silent machine of observation. The sun had dipped to a pale gold, shadows stretching long and jagged across the terrain. Each crevice, each boulder, each small movement could mean life or death. Her rifle rested lightly against her shoulder, though it felt like an extension of her body now. Her fingers brushed the stock without conscious thought, twitching slightly, anticipating, calculating. The valley was quiet, too quiet. And then a flicker of motion. 3 figures, moving deliberately, cautiously along the tree line. Her pulse spiked. She recognized the pattern immediately, coordinated, trained, experienced, not regular soldiers, not amateurs. Her mind raced, orders flashed in her memory, rules of engagement, observation, report, survive. Her eyes narrowed. One figure lagged behind the others, smaller, younger, exhausted. She froze. Recognition sparked in her chest. The girl, the one she had saved earlier. Relief surged for a heartbeat, then sharpened into alarm. The enemy had returned, more organized this time, flanking the girl in a cruel trap. Her hands shook slightly against the rifle, not fear, adrenaline, determination. She whispered coordinates into her radio, steady, calm. 3 hostiles, girl in sight, grid 4-2, engagement imminent. Static, then hold position, observation only. Her stomach twisted, observation only. That order sounded reasonable, logical, safe. But logic didn't save lives in front of her. Her humanity screamed at her to act. She pressed the cheek of her rifle against her shoulder, exhaled slowly, and made her choice. Shots rang out, echoing across the valley. Controlled, precise, calculated. The enemy faltered, confusion etched into their movements. She fired again, each shot deliberate. Her mind was a machine of focus, honed by exhaustion and necessity. Every instinct, every memory of training guided her. The girl dove behind a boulder, terrified. She could see it in the slight tremble of her small frame. The girl had learned what it meant to survive, but she hadn't learned the cost yet. Her chest tightened. She could feel every heartbeat, every flicker of fear and hope intertwined. The remaining enemy advanced, one figure sprinting toward the girl. She calculated angles, timing, distance. One shot, two shots. Precision that came from hours of silent observation, from necessity, from the knowledge that hesitation meant death. The figure dropped. The others scrambled for cover, reassessing. Her radio crackled. Status. Clear, she whispered, voice low, steady. Girl safe. She exhaled. For a moment the valley was still again, quiet, unforgiving, waiting. She pressed her forehead against the stone. Eyes closed briefly, letting herself feel the ache of exhaustion, the heavy pull of her fatigue. The ridge had become a crucible. She had been tested physically, morally, emotionally, and she had endured. But there was no time for rest, not yet. A distant rumble reached her ears. Not artillery, not gunfire, something heavier. Movement, closer, approaching fast. Her pulse quickened. She scanned. The valley opened, revealing armored vehicles, a convoy moving with surprising speed, enemy reinforcements. Her stomach twisted. They were fast, too fast. She pressed the mic. Enemy convoy approaching grid 50, multiple vehicles, armed. Static, then, observation only, reinforcements en route. Observation only. Again. The order echoed in her mind, clashing with every instinct screaming at her to act. She swallowed, forcing calm, patience, calculation, silent action. The convoy moved with precision, unaware of her eyes, unaware of the ridge. Her scope caught every glint of metal, every shadow, every subtle sign of movement. She calculated trajectories, angles, distances, every detail mattered. Her finger hovered near the trigger. Not yet, not until the moment was exact. Time stretched, slowed, then collapsed into a single heartbeat. The first vehicle breached a choke point. She exhaled slowly, then acted. Shots rang out precise, deadly, each one disabling a target without unnecessary violence. Chaos erupted. The convoy faltered, confusion spreading among the enemy ranks. She stayed low, scanning, adjusting, reporting. Every instinct, every action, a blend of training and necessity. The valley descended into controlled chaos. Support units moved in from below, securing positions, engaging the enemy with coordination and precision. Her chest burned, muscles screaming, yet she remained, focused, silent, invisible. Because that was her strength. Not loud, not celebrated, not visible. Silent, resilient, steady. She thought of the civilians she had saved, faces that lingered in her mind, reminders that her duty wasn't just to orders but to humanity itself. By nightfall, the valley was secured. The enemy had withdrawn, disorganized, demoralized. Reinforcements took positions, confirming the ridge and surrounding areas as safe. She remained alone, vigilant, watching. The sun had dipped below the horizon, painting the world in shades of crimson and violet. Shadows merged with darkness, hiding secrets, waiting for another day. Her hands rested on the rifle, fingers brushing the metal, cold, heavy, necessary. She pressed her forehead against the stone, eyes closing for a moment, breathing shallow, alive. Her mind wandered to her brother, to the promises she had made and broken, to the strength he had believed she possessed. And she whispered softly to the night, to the ridge, to the empty air. Sometimes courage isn't loud. It's silent. It's staying when everything inside you says run. It's holding on and letting the world move around you until you can act again. The ridge was quiet, alive, waiting, expecting. And she remained. Because silent duty was her voice, resilience her shield, humanity her hidden weapon. Because in a world of noise, chaos, and war, her actions, quiet, deliberate, and unseen, spoke louder than guns ever could. Why did the silence feel heavier than any gunfire? The ridge was quiet now. Only the wind, soft against stone and armor, whispered through jagged peaks. The valley below had settled into a fragile calm. Smoke and dust lingered faintly, carried by the evening breeze, mixing with the scent of earth, metal, and something faintly human. She rested on her elbows, rifle beside her. Her body ached in ways she hadn't realized were possible. Muscle fatigue burned, joints screamed, and yet she felt a strange clarity, a sort of hollow calm that only came after everything else had passed. The last 24 hours had been a crucible. Exhaustion, moral strain, and the relentless tension of life-and-death decisions had tested her in ways she hadn't imagined. And yet she had endured. She closed her eyes, letting memories drift in. The boy from the valley, his small hands trembling as she gave him water. The girl, hiding behind a boulder, eyes wide with fear and hope. Faces she had saved, faces that had survived because she had acted. Her chest tightened at the thought, relief mixed with grief, pride mingled with guilt. She had kept silent, held her post, observed, acted, but the cost was not hers alone. Every choice had consequences unseen, echoing in the lives she touched. She had known this, and yet she had acted anyway. The ridge stretched around her, cold and indifferent. Stone pressed against her cheek. Her gloves were stiff with dirt and blood. Her rifle, once an extension of her body, now felt almost alien in its stillness. A faint voice broke the silence, not over the radio, not through orders, human, soft, careful. "You did well." She opened her eyes. One of the support soldiers from earlier approached cautiously, face pale, eyes tired, but respect shone through every line. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Words felt unnecessary. She had no need for praise. The ridge itself, the lives she had saved, the silent triumph of survival, that was enough. He lingered for a moment, then nodded and retreated. She exhaled slowly. Let the tension drain from her shoulders, but not all of it, because vigilance never fully leaves, not in her line of work, not in her life. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the world in deep crimson and violet. Shadows merged with darkness. Stars began to prick the black sky. She traced constellations faintly, letting her mind wander to simpler times. Her brother's face, his laugh echoing faintly in memory, his stubborn pride, the promise she had never spoken aloud. And she whispered softly into the empty air, "This is for you." The radio crackled faintly, a mundane check-in from base, but she ignored it. Orders, rules, procedure, they all felt distant now. What mattered was here in this ridge, in the silence, in the lives she had protected. Her thoughts drifted further. Duty had been her language for so long, observation, action, survival, silence. But humanity had spoken. In the trembling hands of a child, in the fearful eyes of a girl, in the quiet acknowledgement of another soldier who had witnessed her resolve. And she had listened, acted, survived. The ridge would demand more of her tomorrow. The valley would stir again. The wind would shift. Shadows would move. But for now she allowed herself a brief exhale, a moment of quiet triumph, not loud or celebrated, but deeply personal. Because silent courage didn't need applause. Because resilience wasn't always visible. Because morality often hid in action rather than words. Her hands brushed the rifle again. Cold, heavy, necessary. A reminder of everything she had done and everything she had held back. She looked at the horizon one last time, letting the crimson fade into violet and the first stars blink awake. And she whispered again, more to herself than anyone else. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts, and sometimes that is enough. The ridge held its breath with her. The valley slept, scarred but alive. The wind carried her words into the night, unseen, unheard, but felt in the quiet corners of the world. Her chest rose and fell slowly. Fatigue pressed against her, but not as a threat, only as a reminder that she was human, fragile, strong, mortal. She pressed her cheek against the stone once more, closing her eyes. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to simply be alive. The night stretched out, infinite calm. And in that silence she understood the truth she had carried through fire, through shadow, through every moral and physical trial. Strength was not in the noise of battle. It was not in recognition or in applause. It was in endurance, in restraint, in action taken when no one watches. She had been doubted, ignored, tested, and yet she had survived, she had protected, she had acted with both precision and humanity. And in that she found her quiet redemption. Because sometimes the world doesn't notice the people who carry it, but that doesn't make their work any less vital. She exhaled one last time, letting the wind carry her breath across the ridge, across the valley, across the scars of battle. Her rifle rested beside her, her hands on her knees, eyes closed, silent. And the ridge waited. For tomorrow, for the next challenge, for the duty she had chosen, the duty she had fulfilled. And in that waiting, in that silence, she found peace. Because sometimes silence speaks louder than guns. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And that was enough.